Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So a few weeks ago, I did a video about that separation ring that landed in Kenya, and it was a doozy of a story. It was 8 feet in diameter, about 1,100 pounds, and it is crazy to think of something that big making it through the atmosphere and landing in some lady's backyard. But in researching that space debris story, I came across another space debris story, and this one is concerning a woman named Lottie Williams, who to this day I believe is the only known person to be struck by space debris. This was back in the 90s, but it's an interesting story, and Lottie told it a few times back in the day, so I pulled some quotes from her story from various news sources, and I thought I would recount it to you guys today as much in her own words as possible, because the odds of this happening is still very remote, and it apparently happened to Lottie. So sit back, get cozy, and let me tell you the story of Lottie Williams. So in January 1997, Lottie Williams and two friends were exercising, doing laps around a park in Tulsa, Oklahoma at about 4 o'clock in the morning when they saw a huge fireball streaking across the sky. Lottie thought she had just witnessed a shooting star. She said, "We were just stunned in awe. It was just a big ball of fire shooting across the night sky at just a fast speed. It was beautiful." So after seeing that gorgeous fireball streak across the night sky, Lottie and her friends started to continue their exercise. She said, "We were still walking through the park when all of a sudden I felt a tap on my shoulder. At first, not expecting a tap and no one that she knew was behind her, she started to run, thinking that a stranger had emerged out of the shadows. But then she heard something hit the ground behind her and skitter into some nearby grass. So curious, Lottie went over to see what had possibly just hit her. And this is what she found. Lottie said the weight was comparable to an empty soda can. It looked like a piece of fabric, except when you tapped it, it sounded metallic. The object was blackened on the edges and consisted of layers of a light metallic material. It was very thin and light. In fact, it was a little bigger than the palm of her hand. And seeing the photo, it does kind of look interesting. It doesn't look like the battery packs we've seen before. Certainly doesn't look like a separation ring. It does kind of have this fabric kind of look. It was about 6 inches long and weighed about 16 grams. And at the time, Lottie thought she had found part of a shooting star. Excited by her discovery, she took the fallen piece of sky to her local library, where she was referred to the Astronomy Club, as well as the National Weather Service, who told her about a Delta II rocket that had re-entered the atmosphere the night before. And like many other people in some of my other videos who find something interesting and unique and are not willing to just let it go, Lottie took the object to the University of Tulsa. And there, Dr. Winston Cornell, an applied associate professor in the Department of Geosciences, studied it with an electron microscope and X-rayed it. Dr. Cornell said it had been partially melted and resembled fiberglass. It appeared to be the kind of material that NASA used to insulate fuel tanks. Lottie then sent it to CORD, the Center for Orbital and Reentry Debris Studies, for analysis. They confirmed that the piece of blackened woven material to be part of the fuel tank of a Delta II rocket that had launched a U.S. Air Force satellite in 1996. And so it turned out that the shooting star Lottie had seen was an Aerojet AJ-10 118K second stage from a Delta II rocket. It had been in a decaying orbit since the launch and re-entered the Earth's atmosphere about 42 nautical miles above Topeka, Kansas, and scattered debris across Oklahoma and Texas. Williams also claims to have talked to NASA and even received a letter from the Deputy Secretary of Defense apologizing for what happened, but not necessarily admitting to where the piece of material came from. When all of this made the news, Lottie admitted that a lot of people were skeptical of her. She said a lot of people thought it was a hoax. I just want people to know that this actually happened. But as of today, Lottie Williams is actually listed in the Guinness World Records as the first person to be hit by space debris. And now, nearly 30 years later, Lottie Williams is still thought to be the only confirmed person to be hit by space debris. Now, Lottie had a lot of things going for her in this instance. The main one being is that she was essentially unhurt by this space junk that dinged her. After all, if she'd been hit by the batteries that went through that guy's house or by that separation ring, this would be a very different story. And I think we've all seen the pictures of Anne Hodges after she was struck by a meteorite that ping-ponged around her living room before hitting her in the hip. Lottie was definitely lucky in the sense that the debris was very light and traveling at a low velocity. Again, she said it ultimately kind of felt like getting hit by an empty soda can, which you would definitely feel and be like, hey, what the... But it's not like ruining your day. It's also thought that this particular piece of space debris was affected by wind currents, which mitigated the impact even more. Astronomer Apostolus Christo at the Armagh Observatory and Planetarium in Ireland explains small pieces of debris like this one usually lose all of their orbital speed by the time they reach the lower parts of the atmosphere. They then free fall the rest of the way, almost as if they were dropped from the top of a high-rise building. But the funniest part of the story for me is that Lottie was kind of disappointed when she found out it was space debris. She had really thought it was from a shooting star. So she said, I had thought it was something celestial. And here it was, something man-made, which just super cracks me up. Like, I got hit by something man-made? Ugh. So disappointing. And apparently Lottie was not the only person to recover a piece of space debris from the Delta II rocket. Remember how I said other space debris came down over Oklahoma and Texas? Well, the largest single piece of debris was a 550-pound propellant tank, which landed only 50 meters from a farmhouse in Georgetown, Texas. Look at this thing, you guys. What a beast. Which really goes to show you how super lucky Lottie Williams is. I mean, one guy gets a 500-pound propellant tank nearly crushing his farmhouse, and Lottie gets an empty soda space can. And Williams seemed to acknowledge her luck. She said, I think I was blessed that it doesn't weigh that much. I mean, I think this is one of the weirdest things that has ever happened to me. Yeah. No kidding, Lottie. I really couldn't find a lot of information on Lottie Williams today or if she got to keep her space debris. It didn't appear so based on everything I read, but I couldn't confirm it either way. I just thought it was a really interesting story, and I don't know if I'm envious of Lottie or if it's like reading the story of a person who avoided a really bad car accident. You're not exactly envious of them, but you know what I mean? I mean, the odds of this thing hitting her, even if it was just a tap on the shoulder, are still really high. And the fact that she went over to the grass to see what hit her rather than just continue with her exercise is what set all of this in motion. And it's something that we should be aware of, right? I mean, shouldn't the people who are allowing the space debris to re-enter be aware of what pieces of space debris are landing and where? Obviously, random civilians are not under any obligation to report that, but I think people like Lottie, aside from being very lucky, are also being very helpful to science. And that's the part of these crazy stories that are always kind of feel good to me. So yeah, that is the story of Lottie Williams. Great name, by the way, and her run-in with a piece of space debris. So what do you guys think? Had you heard of this story before? I have no memory of it, which I think is interesting because I feel like in the late 90s, this would have been kind of an uncommon story. But my teenage brain was probably thinking of other things. But let me know in the comments below if you guys had heard the story of Lottie Williams before. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out for story time. And as always, I will see you in the next video.